Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. Today we're going to be discussing Minit, the RPG that should not be confused with Half Minute Hero, but it is also a kind of fast, compressed RPG. And I'm joined, as always, by Billy the Clean Bandit Rothert.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. As always, happy to be on the show. Minit was a very interesting game. I can't wait to talk about some of the interesting concepts that this game is built upon.
And I am also joined by Pete the One Minute Man Busby.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I try to do everything with as much speed as possible, and I mean everything.
Efficiency.
That's it. You only need a minute if you can get it done in that time. Animal fact for this week. So this comes from an article, it's an article from the Journal of Experimental Animal Behavior from 1995, March. And it's about how pigeons can be trained to successfully discriminate color slides of paintings by Monet and Picasso.
Aww.
So if you give them enough, eventually they learn, okay, this one's by Monet, this one's by Picasso. And then if you present new paintings they haven't seen during training, they can tell which one's which.
Oh.
That's pretty
cool.
cool.
See, when you started and there was a pregnant pause after discriminate, I thought people were training pigeons to be really discriminatory.
Just like bigoted.
Racist, bigoted pigeons.
This pigeon, you show it a person and it's like, this is a bad person. This is a good person.
Nope. Paintings.
They were going to replace all beat cops with pigeons.
It's more like Hotiful Vice, you know?
Yeah.
Little known fact about the Giuliani administration. That's
now that you mentioned it. Now that those words have been put together, someone's going to make a sequel to Hotiful Boyfriend, but it's going to be like Grand Theft Auto,
but with pigeons.
Man, I just want. That would be pretty great if that was a plot line in the next Hotiful Boyfriend. It was just a pigeon who is trained to tell the difference between Picasso and Monet, and that's his thing. He's
a very arty sort of deep pigeon.
He's a very arty bird, and but those are the only two he cares about.
Or if it was some sort of Jack Ryan thing where it's like, hey, I'm just an accountant, but now I have to be a secret agent.
But only caring about specifically Monet and Picasso.
Right, but I'm also a pigeon.
You're getting it. You're picking up what I'm putting down.
There you go.
Which means that
I feel like we just got to monetize this, guys. We have to put the stamp on it right now and just claim it.
Another $1 million idea.
Another $1 million idea. We'll make a sequel to a game in a franchise we own no rights to, and then we'll release it for no money.
That none of us respect or even enjoy.
Just like Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden.
Exactly, but with
it
less
worked
panache.
so well for them. Yeah, it worked so well for them.
Millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, the sequel to that game is still coming, apparently.
Yeah,
what have we been doing for the last 3 years, if not this, guys?
It's a great point. So, speaking of great points, sometimes our listeners have some.
Oh, no.
And it's email time. You can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got a comment section, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Emails are easiest because they are easy for me to find. And this actually comes in. Should I read an email first or a YouTube comment? Because sometimes people post on our YouTubes, and this one.
Let's give the
open.
YouTube some spotlight right now.
Yep. This comes from YouTube, and it's not terrible, so here we are. This comes in from John Atwood. Hey, gents, 3 things. 1, recently, I've stumbled and fumbled my long, dumb hands onto a few Eastern writers. Once you know the way broadly, you can see it in all things. What does this mean to you?
Once you know the way broadly, you can see it in all things?
Yes. He says, at face value, it feels like an old military adage. Make your bed to perfection, shine your shoes to perfection, drill, drill, drill. Everything is done with absolute focus and effort. There's something deeper, but I don't have the words for it. I'm not looking for any cliche. There's art in everything we do, la-di-da, cop-out. Oh, wise keeper of the consoles, help a brother out here. That's one.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that it's once you have a particular lens and understand the world in a particular way, you can apply that lens to just about any thought. You can see it in anything.
Is it necessarily supposed to be positive, though?
No, I don't think that that's necessarily positive.
No, I don't think what you're articulating is. My question is the quote necessarily positive? I'm curious what the rest of the context around it is. I mean, if it's just like a sort of like art of war, there might not be much context around it. It might just be an aphorism.
I mean, the only context I have for this is it's from one half of the Earth.
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, I don't think he gave us
the
any more
great
than that.
Australian philosopher. I don't know. I don't have a good Australian philosopher name. I'm sorry. Andrew Bogut says.
Just at first glance, first, can you give me the phraseology again? I just want to make sure I have all the words
Of course I can.
correct.
Once you know the way broadly, you can see it in all things. That's a
My
fortune cookie. He opened a fortune cookie, read it, and then sent it to us.
Pretty much, yeah.
So when I first think of this phrase, my immediate knee-jerk reaction goes to Platonic forms and like a type of Aristotelian ethics.
Some more fortune cookie stuff, really.
Yeah, just like basically more fortune cookie, but it's more like Greek fortune cookie. So like, I don't know, like fortune, like falafel or something. I don't know. Or like
I would
Euro,
eat a
like
fortune
Euro.
falafel.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if falafel's Mediterranean, but I'm not sure if it's actually Greek.
It's not Greek.
Yeah, but like what?
It's delicious,
Whatever.
Well, I
so
feel like we've answered the question to the level
Yeah,
of
just-
effort that it was
though.
written.
Just move fast. Yeah.
Well,
Two.
I'll finish.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to finish. I just want to finish the thought. So, in Platonic forms and Aristotelian ethics, if you were to sort of combine these two ideas, if you, I'm going to just expand on the two words "the way," meaning like the best way. If you understand your own like virtue ethics and what it means to achieve your own excellence, you can see not only your avenues to your excellence through all things, but you can see each of those things if like you can see their avenues to excellence too.
Well put. That was a lot more respect than I gave.
I mean, hey, I want to
Kudos.
respect our viewers. So John, where these two monkeys were ready to just disregard your comments, I just want you to know that I took you seriously.
I'm still ready to disregard it.
Two.
All right. 2. This is an email?
Yes. Well, it's a YouTube comment, so it's like an email, but more
There's,
degenerate.
it's part 2 of the YouTube
Of
comment.
this
All right.
comment,
It's
yes.
probably only going to go downhill from here.
Since you played the Vania in Metroidvania, y'all should play Metroid Zero Mission. Most would say Prime, or maybe M is the Metroid in Metroidvania. No, they wouldn't. They would say Super Metroid is the Metroid in Metroidvania, but nice try. But if we are looking at the cleanest version of what makes a Metroidvania game, I would give it to Zero Mission. It's a Game Boy game, but I found an emulator a while back. Yeah, Zero Mission's a good game. Though I played Fusion, I think, was the first Metroid game I played. But I'm 100% certain when people say Metroidvania, they mean Super Metroid and original Metroid. So yeah, we will take that into advisement.
I've never played a Metroid game.
What?
I think it's. I mean, for me, it's probably Fusion. Honestly, it's certainly not any of the Prime series. You can't really go into the 3D Metroid games. Those, though those are amazing. I really think those are among the best Metroid games. They're fundamentally they like take a step away from what a Metroid game is or what a Metroidvania game is.
Yeah, and I would say that I strictly mean it because the term Metroidvania was coined in the 90s, and that was coined around when Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid were the ones that were out. You know, the side-scrolling sort of adventure game combo that those games are. And 3, I comment about breaking games. If a game doesn't want to be broken, it shouldn't give you the tools to break it. I think this is a problem with difficulty levels in video games in general. I can put this best if I talk about Halo Reach on hardcore. I have the most fun with the sniper, DMR, and pistol, but on hardcore with 8 elites that fuck my shit up at every single checkpoint, I have to switch from what's fun and take and takes more precision, my idea of being good at the game. I felt forced to use the plasma pistol, forced in a direction like that isn't fun. Being forced in a direction like that isn't fun anymore. From that moment, I felt cheated out of my fun, so I figured out ways to break the game. Sure, I could go back to lower difficulty, but it felt like moving through sand. The enemies were slower, dumber, weaker, to the point that it felt like I was shooting fish in a barrel, not being challenged from adaptive, difficult enemies. In Symphony of the Night, that big fuck boss with a trillion HP took me out of my fun, so Casagram, Shield Rod combo, whatever I need to get back to my fun. Basically, when a game takes away my fun, I'm going to push back and break the game until I can have fun again. But in breaking the game, I sort of lose a bit of my enjoyment. What do y'all think? I think you have to look at why you're breaking the game. I think that's fair. What do you think, Billy?
What's that?
What do you think, Billy, about that?
I just want to hear the first sentence again. If a game didn't want to, if a game didn't want to be broken, then what?
Don't put the broken stuff in the game. If a game doesn't want to be broken, it shouldn't give you the tools to break it.
I don't think. So, I understand that they put powerful combinations in the game, but I think they were designed to be things that you don't get so easily, and they're like enhancers to your New Game Plus run, not designed to be used for your first run. I think they were just assuming that people wouldn't find these things in their first run. And that's probably a safe bet at the time this game was released. So I'm not really going to hold it against Castlevania too much, but I still have my same critique that I broke the game, and so the rest of the game became trivial for me, and it took away a lot of my experience. But I don't think Metroidvania games, because other games in the genre can be broken similarly. I don't think the game has a responsibility to make sure that nothing is broken. In the same way that like a AAA title that's trying to sell like a big narrative experience needs to not break it,
Mm-hmm. Pete, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what was I going to say? Oh, I'm all for anybody playing their game any way they want, right? It's their game, it's their experience. But I don't think you can blame the game, because like I said last time, nobody's forcing you to play it that way. This is a decision you've made.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's certainly things you can do, like in a Dark Souls game, for example, that are quote-unquote game-breaking, right? They make fights trivial. But part of what makes a Dark Souls experience fun is how you're deciding to play the game that run. And it's not until you've beaten Dark Souls, I'm just going to use Dark Souls, the first Dark Souls game, as the example here, but it would apply for any of those kinds of games, that you have replayability and decide, I'm going to do it this kind of run. I mean, it could work in Mass Effect too. Like you could say, I'm going to go like Renegade this time, or Paragon this time, or I'm going to go Biotics or like Tech or whatever.
Pacifist. That's not a thing you can do.
Whatever. So you go through your first playthrough and you don't discover any of the broken stuff. I think maybe there is a responsibility of a game to not have the broken stuff too accessible, but have it like properly hidden so that it's designed for that person who's going to play it on their third or fourth playthrough, or maybe keep it locked up in New Game Plus altogether.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's definitely a design that I think is more replayable and more durable.
I'm actually going to quote an example here. There's a weapon in Ratchet and Clank called the Rhino, and it's an acronym that stands for Rip Ya New One. And it basically just shoots like a dozen homing missiles that like one shot everything on the screen, and so it trivializes every part of combat, and you can't reasonably get that weapon until New Game Plus. So that's a good example of having a broken thing sitting there right in front of you that you just can't have until later.
Well put. So we have another email. This comes from a longtime listener, many-time writer, occasional co-host, Chris Zombie Pie Redacted. And this is not, thankfully, he did not send us more Namco timeline.
Oh, thank God.
Thank goodness. I was so scared when I got the email. I opened it. I was like, oh, no. How can a font display mania? But this one is a normal email. Well, as far as, as normal as these emails are. Dear garbage people, you human trash bags, all cap, exclamation point.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Y'all chuckleheads spent 20 minutes joshing around about Symphony of the Night's camp factor and dialogue, but didn't even talk about the best part of the game. This oversight is one of the worst in Deep Listen's history. He's not wrong. How in the world did none of you talk about Castlevania Symphony of the Night's ending credits song, I Am the Wind? It's the best part of the game. After killing the true boss and Alucard parts ways with Maria, smooth jazz soothes our souls. I get they removed the song in all re-releases of the game, but it needs to be seen to be believed. A game as gothic and campy as Symphony of the Night ends with a smooth jazz love ballad. It's good shit. The song is actually about Alucard knowing he needs to sacrifice himself to save Maria. It's fucking deep. It's so deep, it probably would have blown Pete's university-educated mind. This demands I invade your podcast to re-educate you dummies. Sorry, nope. It doesn't. But I will play the song, at least part of it, because you guys both played versions that did not have this, correct? Or you did not at least
I didn't listen to it. Yeah, regardless.
I played most of the game on mute. I only turned off.
That was my mistake.
I only turned off mute when I knew that there was going to be voice acting, which I had to listen to.
So, are you all ready?
Yeah, sure.
Here you go.
Are we going to get sued for this?
I doubt
Not
it.
if I don't play that much.
Why is this?
I think we have enough.
There's 30 seconds.
Sure,
so
that
I
should
don't
be
think
safe.
we can be sued.
We're all worse off for having heard it, though.
You should listen to all of it. Oh my goodness. It's 4.5 minutes long. It sounds like Kenny G is just involved directly. And that's how they decided to send the game off after you killed Dracula.
Well, hang on now.
Yep.
So, other games have done this before and after, right? Games that are otherwise very serious. And then they take a song that might change the way the player looks at the scene. One of the examples that comes to mind is Calling to the Night from the Metal Gear Solid series. In other ways, the Metal Gear Solid series is like a pretty like serious toned.
I mean, they have a weird tone because Hideo Kojima seems to think that they're very serious, and some people take those games very serious. But they're also about giant robots that shoot nukes, and they say things like "the Patriots" all the time as though it's serious. So I would say Metal Gear thinks it's very serious a lot of the time, except when Snake is like popping boners and saying weird shit like that.
Yeah.
But those games are not serious. Those games are anime as hell, and they are ridiculous. Just like Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
I think my analogy still kind of holds up because there's at least one other example of a game that takes like a very jazzy like female vocal like ballad and juxtaposes it with an otherwise like serious tone.
I mean, I'm sure it happens. It's not that they tried to play some music that was a little bit different than the game. It's what they chose that befuddles me truly. Like, smooth jazz is not a thing that people really associate with quality.
Gothic?
With quality.
Whoa. What do you mean quality? Are you saying smooth jazz isn't good?
Yeah.
Gino,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. I'm just gonna end the podcast to be done here.
I just think that smooth.
This is where Gina would say, "Till next time, peace." We're just gonna
Instead, Billy's just gonna loop that 30 seconds over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's gonna be the intro and outro to this podcast now.
I don't know why it's elevator music. to end that game. But damn, it's great. And I also love that they have retconned it out of every re-release of that game. So
I mean,
like,
maybe it's just because they didn't have like the licensing to keep on using it over and over again. Is it like an original score, or is it?
Yeah, yes. I Am the Wind is definitely an original. They made that happen.
Huh.
Weird. It's weird. I love it. It's great. It's perfect for that game. Pete, what is your emotional reaction?
I'm mostly confused. Like,
Great.
if this is part of the game, should I be like thinking of these relationships differently? Like, is there a romance subplot I'm not really getting?
I think that there's a romance subplot in that you're playing a game and there's one male character and one female character, and they talk.
Got it.
So they probably have the hots for each other.
Very romantic. Okay. Now I understand.
Yeah, you didn't think of it. Like, wow, Alucard, you spoke to that woman 3 times in this game.
Totally gonna do it.
Yep. The 1990s were a simpler time. And so I think that's it for emails this week. You can get in touch with the show at deeplistenspod, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. It's time to discuss Minit. Billy, quick, describe Minit. You have a minute.
Minit is a game about a nameless protagonist that wakes up and finds a sword, and the sword curses that person, so they die every 60 seconds, but they have to somehow break this Sisyphean loop, and they have a minute to achieve each of these narrative plot points to get to a boss that, would break the cycle. It's some kind of like, demon lord of swords that curse people. It's honestly kind of the whole game.
That's pretty much it.
Yep, and also important, it is Minit spelled Minit.
I assume for search engine optimization purposes.
Yeah. I don't think you could brand or trademark the word minute. The real word.
I think you're
minute.
correct.
So good on them for getting that trademark. So Pete, why did you pick this game? What jumped out?
So I was trying to get us a game that was this year, because we've been a little short about it. And I think there's something to be said for atypical time structure in the game and how it changes your relationship with the protagonist, right? Like, if we think about maybe one of the most famous atypical time structures, it's probably Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. But even there, you have sort of 3 days, rewind powers, and a whole bunch of other things that prolong your attachment to the protagonist, whereas here you're really working within that 60-second time crunch. So I was sort of curious, all right, what happens to us and how we interact with our main character, right? The hero we're controlling.
Yeah, and I think the game doesn't give you a lot to go off of in terms of the main character.
No, he's just like a blob with a sword for the most part.
Sometimes he's got a sword, sometimes he's got a can of water, sometimes he's got a camera.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time he's just wandering around, and then within 60 seconds you need to achieve a goal or die and try again.
Yes, most of it's get a thing. If you get a thing, you pretty much get to keep that thing during your next run.
Yeah, and that's the interesting conceit. You get to keep items you find. Any changes you make to the world that kind of unlock zones, that stays. But any enemies you've defeated, destructible objects you've destroyed, or like that sort of stuff will not persist for the most part.
Some destructible objects stay destroyed, but they're like plot destructible items.
Yeah, they're either plot related or they are collectible sort of things, like opening a treasure chest or something like that. But I like the structure. Like, you generally have an idea of what a thing is you can accomplish, and then as long as you accomplish something in a life, or feel like you made progress towards something, it has a nice pace. You're always seeing new stuff. At least it did for a while, until I ran out of plot lines that I felt I understood, and then it got to be a grind until I looked up how to progress. What did you guys think of, let's say, the first zone of Minit?
I thought you were going to say the first minute of Minit, and I was going to leave.
Well, now that you've phrased the question, Billy, what do you think of the first minute of Minit?
throw my fucking headset on the ground.
Pete, what is your...
So it all starts really when you get the sword.
Yeah.
Right, like before that, there's really, you're wandering around mostly, but it's sort of like one of those, it's dangerous to go into the tall grass moments where you need this before you do anything else.
Yeah, and at that point, you get the 60-second time limit, and it takes a little bit to figure out, like, what's going on with the 60 seconds, but once you have an idea of what the rules are of the world, I feel like it picks up pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's an interesting tension, I think, in this game between talking to people and progressing, because at least early on, I felt a real time pressure, like I need to keep moving, I need to do stuff, and simply having a character speak dialogue takes time for the dialogue to be written, and that always felt like I was wasting time.
Yep. But then that's, like, this is where, we're already getting the sort of the issue I want to talk about, right, is the tension basically boils down to, okay, how often are you willing to just kill your protagonist? Because, right, there'll be a lot of times where it's advantageous for you to just say, all right, I'm only 20 seconds into this run, but it's time to sort of auto-die. Like, there's a button you can kill that's basically just explode and you start over.
Yeah.
So at that point, you can say to yourself, all right, I'm going to sack around in order to enjoy, not enjoy, but in order to read this dialogue and sort of understand the world. So the tension resolves itself in a disregard for your protagonist's life.
Yeah, and there would definitely be more tension if your character exhibited any sort of agency or any complaints about dying. Your character doesn't even seem to understand. They don't talk. No one really talks to them with an expectation that they're going to talk back. Your character's not a person.
There doesn't seem to be any understanding on his part either that he's repeating time.
No. And
your character isn't a character.
Yeah, because your avatar has no characterization of any kind, it's really hard to project any sort of meaning onto his dying over and over and over again. It's a vehicle to an end. It's pure mechanics.
Do you think that pure mechanics is necessary in order for you to sort of have that detachment necessary to kill him, sometimes deliberately, over and over again? Like, I understand it might be more interesting if he, like, looked at you and, like, you're really going to kill me again, and you're like, yeah, buddy, sorry. But, like, that might be it'd be a much different game then.
How would this compare to Dark Souls, where you die, like, innumerable times?
Yeah, but I think in Dark Souls also, your character's not really a character. You're just kind of an avatar for the player.
That's not true, because in Minit, the level of characterization is 0 out of 100, which is a big difference than in Dark Souls when it's like 1 or 3 or 5 out of 100.
But in Dark Souls,
going from 0 to anything is better.
In Dark Souls, if you die, it's a failure in some respect, right? Like, you were trying to perform an objective, you failed, thus you died. In Minit, you need to die in order to achieve these larger objectives. I think that's a relevant and important difference here. That's not a failure. It's a game design that you personally need to kill your protagonist.
Well, you don't... Okay, let's be clear here. You only need to kill your protagonist if you're trying to speedrun the game.
All right, granted. I mean, you could stand and, like, just sort of watch time tick by.
Because if I'm playing Dark Souls and I'm trying to speedrun the game, I kill myself too. Because I need to speedrun the game.
So, just as a clarification, I obviously never played Dark Souls. There are situations such that in order to move faster or to achieve some objective, you need to kill yourself?
Yeah, because just like in Minit, when you die, you go back to where you last left off, and a lot of times it's faster to go backwards that way than to actually backtrack.
Yeah, it's just like fast traveling via.
It like teleports you back to where you wanted to go before. And there are times, for example, in like real Dark Souls speedruns, where they'll sit at a bonfire, go through a huge portion of the game because they need to just get back to that specific bonfire, and it's like they'll otherwise skip other bonfires in the game because when they die or when they when they choose to kill themselves, they don't want to go back to those bonfires. They want to go back to this one specifically. And so the other times that you die in Minit is when you either when you have no choice, so it's out of your control, or because you did fail your objective. in time.
Yeah, I get that. I just wish... I know that Dark Souls has a little bit of characterization of your main character. Minit has quite a bit less. But I think they could have made it an interesting conundrum for your main character. I don't think... Like, for example, we played Undertale. And I think there's definitely an aesthetic overlap between Minit and Undertale. And
Aesthetically, yeah.
one of the main conceits of Undertale is that there's a endless loop that's taking place here, and the characters know that they're trapped in an endless loop. And Minit is exactly that, and it seems like all the characters you interact with, or at least some of the characters you interact with, understand that there is a loop that's happening, but even those characters their dialogue doesn't change over time. Like, you talk to someone once and they say, oh, please go over here and stop the loop. And then if you talk to them the 100th time, they still say the same thing. It would be interesting if the world changed based on the number of iterations or the number of times you spoke to someone. Like, if they just kept some sort of counter or variable that let them know how many times you've spoken to these people, and it just kept changing. Like, maybe the awareness of the situation got higher and higher the further in you got. Or your character changed in some way, or maybe before every life, maybe you had a thought bubble or something,
Right.
and it changed over time. Like, that little change to add just some level of, I don't know, interactivity to the world, some level of just life to it, like it had stakes.
Right, granted, but I think... So here the structure is that the lives are meaningless, right? Like, the essential variable isn't the amount of lives you take, although the game does give you a count of how many you've used at the end. The essential variable is this time, right? You have a minute to achieve some sort of limited series of objectives.
Is it a variable or a constant?
It's a variable.
Sure, constant, whatever, it doesn't matter. So whatever it is, the important factor is the time, right? So if you do introduce this, then the lives again become the pertinent factor, at which point they then become important again. So I think if you want to keep time as the relevant factor, which I think Minit does, that necessarily precludes any identification. So even if they put it in, the very fact that, no, I understand my protagonist's life is meaningless would render it ineffectual anyway.
But they kind of... It's not as though time is marching ever forward and your character's life is in jeopardy, but ultimately is meaningless. There's actual concrete change that you're affecting upon the world, and it's odd to me as a player to not see that change really reflected in the characters around you, and that the passage of time, which some of the characters seem to be able to perceive, is not reflected in their dialogue beyond the single line that we'll give you. I'm not necessarily arguing the larger point of whether they're centralizing the time or your characters' lives. I'm arguing from just the perspective of, I guess, narrative cohesion and consistency. It's odd. You know?
I think it's certainly an opportunity missed, Gino.
Yeah.
But I think that's about all we can say about that. Is that it's an opportunity missed. I don't know if we can really examine so much of this, because we'll only get so far as it's an opportunity missed.
Yeah.
Other games can certainly do stuff like this, and I think this is an example of how a game can be made using this mechanic that has been seen before, and probably use it to better effect. Not that Minit was a failure, but there's certainly more that can be explored here.
Yeah, and I think that Minit, from its structure, it's basically Zelda, but they've taken a conceit that everything's in 60-second chunks. But the unlock progression is basically the Zelda progression. You get a sword. That sword lets you cut bushes. You get
claws.
Claws?
Yeah, you get claws at some point. They help you cut trees, I think.
Oh, yeah, you get a glove.
Gloves.
You get gardening gloves that let you cut trees. You get a flashlight that lets you see in the dark, flippers that let you swim. You get the ability to throw your sword. Like, there's all these little upgrades that let you navigate the world quicker and let you enter otherwise inaccessible places. And as you keep progressing out, you'll find more money, which can get you. You can get coins, and that will get you speed boots that I think make you move faster.
They do.
You can get hearts that make it so that you're more survivable, and all of these different little upgrades allow you to, speed. Obviously, if you're constrained by 60 seconds all the time, being faster means you can explore more places. There are some places that you cannot get through without moving faster. There are some areas that you just need to be able to take enough damage to get around damage gates, and all of these things just amplify the number of places you can go. But ultimately, you're gaining things that are pretty traditional Zelda experiences. You're getting items to go further to get more items until you take on the final boss. And the design itself, I like the way that the few areas they have in this game kind of cohese together as you get more fast travel and movement options. Like at first you're starting in this kind of shack area, then you move to a desert because you can go through a dungeon that has snakes in it, and you get a flashlight. Then there's a third area which is kind of a town with a factory. And
a hotel, yeah.
In a hotel, yeah. And you can eventually go to an island that has a few puzzles on it, and then that kind of gives you access to a true fast travel to teleport between each of these areas. So at first you have to physically walk everywhere. Then you get fast travel. You get objects that let you just move between previously inaccessible areas, like the flippers let you swim. Things that used to be blocked by rivers, now you can just walk straight over them. You can cut down trees that used to be a problem. You even open up kind of Dark Souls-esque quick travel shortcuts as well.
Right.
And the world starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is nice. It's one of those nice fun. I don't want to say it's almost diamond shaped. It starts small, fans out, and then gets small again by the end.
Right. When you get you can also change your starting location. You get new shacks. I think they could use the term that you then start there if you die.
Yeah. Did you guys get stuck at any point?
As in, failing to understand where to go, or physically stuck?
Failing to understand where to go.
Sort of, because there were times where I was like, I don't know what to do next, and I just went somewhere else and did another thing. And then because the game is small, once you just kind of explore everything, you will have at some point done what you needed to do, even if you don't understand that was the next step in the series. So I think there were probably times where I got, air quotes, stuck, but I didn't know that I got stuck because I just did something else, and then later, after doing 2 or 3 more objectives, at some point I did the next objective that I needed in that line of objectives, but I didn't know that it was part of the chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were many times where I didn't necessarily have a plan, but I was always able to do something. The only time I ever felt like I got kind of stuck were in certain times when you had to push crates.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily clear on, there was a time where you had to push a specific crate into a conveyor belt in the factory, basically.
Right.
I don't think I necessarily realized, this is a different sort of crate than the other crates.
Yeah, they have some objects that look pushable but are not, in fact, pushable.
Yes.
And that can be kind of annoying here and there. There were moments when, trying to get the flippers, you have to find a bunch of characters and get them to check into a hotel. Mm-hmm. And some of finding those characters can just feel arbitrary. One of them is just hiding under a destructible object or a pushable object. And if you just don't push it because there's no real reason to push it, then you just won't get access to you won't get the flippers. There was one character who they kept mentioning they were looking for their credit card, and up until then I had found items just by walking and picking up items, and this credit card is something that you need to just push this character who's living inside of a movable crate to the right location on the screen. And that was just the leap from finding items to moving a character to a place where they will find the item was too big for me, because that's just not a thing that the game asks you to do anywhere else. It's a one-off.
Yeah, it returns to your sort of question of, okay, because of the time constraints, do you necessarily have to trade off the sort of greater world building, listening to dialogue? It's the same with instructions. Like the more time you spend giving instructions, the less time you have to actually carry out those instructions.
Yeah, and I mean, there was another character that I needed to find that they only surface when there's 10 seconds left on the clock, and there's nothing about the game that's the only time that the game cares about the clock directly in that way. Like, you have to be in this place at this time, at least that I've noticed. So there were a lot of mechanics that were done once, and because they were only ever done once and were not really scaffolded before or after, I just didn't perceive that was an option, this game is really short, and it's got a lot of things that it's trying to accomplish very quickly, and so I understand some of the inelegance, but it just led to me being frustrated occasionally.
I felt like I got the closest that I came to getting proper stuck, and I knew what I was supposed to do, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, was in the last sequence of the game. I mentioned earlier in the brief description that your overall goal is to just get enough, advancement and understanding to, and I guess like character ability, to go to this factory where these swords are being made and stop the factory and stop the final boss from making these swords. Well, in order to do that, you had to destroy 3 parts of the factory, and there's, I guess you could do it in any order, but just the order that I chose to do it, I thought I had soft locked myself in the game, and it took me probably an hour to try all the different combinations to get myself unstuck. I knew where I had to go. I knew what I needed to do, but the path that I normally took to get there was now unavailable to me because I had lost the sword.
Okay.
And so there's a part of that sequence where you lose the sword, but it's supposed to just be for like a few seconds. Like you just start your next life when you go back and get it. But I did that combination, I think, in not the intended order, or maybe not the best order, and so I got stuck in a situation where it had took me like almost a full minute just to get the sword again, so that I could progress, and I had to take a really ass backwards way of getting back to where I was.
Yeah, I think that is part of the game. I also lost the sword at one point, and the way that you get the sword back is, going this path that you would not ordinarily go, but you can't cut things anymore, and you barely have any time left. I basically didn't get to the sword in one go. I got halfway and then saved at a home that is a little bit closer to where I wanted to be, and then I went from there. But it was definitely almost speedrun-esque. Like, you really needed to go quickly and be precise about your movements.
And I think that's not I think it's not intended that we solve that part of the game in that way. I think that part was implemented to avoid this as a potential soft lock. I'm speculating here, but I don't think that's the intended way to do that puzzle. I think it's intended to be done in a different order, and then you don't lose the sword. You lose the sword for a much shorter time because you open up a better path to get to it. But I forgot to do that.
So we're talking about in the factory, you need to blow up 2 areas, right?
3.
You have to turn off a conveyor belt on the right. You need to blow up a machine that's making swords. And it's kind of funny, the factory, one side is making blades, one side is making hilts, and then they're being combined in one machine. So first you need to, you can, in any order, shut off the conveyor belt that makes blades. You can also destroy the machine that makes hilts, and then once you destroy both of those, you can go down to kind of the area where the swords are being dumped, and in there, you have to kind of attack this wheel, this cog, to destroy the machine. And first you attack it, then it catches fire, and then you need to use a water bucket, and then you get your sword stuck in the machine. Right? Or no, first you get your sword. You get your sword stuck in the machine and it catches on fire, and then you need to get the water bucket there to get your sword back as kind of a mega sword and finish the game.
Yeah.
But don't you need to basically, you walk in kind of a circuitous route, and then did you just not get the shortcut?
Yeah,
the drill?
I didn't get the shortcut with the drill.
Oh no.
So that's what I was confused about, because I knew that it would be really easy to go there again, but I couldn't figure out what I was missing, and I was missing the drill shortcut. And so I had to take like a 55-second walking route, even with the fast boots, all the way through the whole factory backwards, basically.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah. If you don't have the fast boots, then I think you would actually be
No,
soft walk.
I did have. You can't do that part without the fast boots.
No, I did it without the fast boots. I never got the fast boots.
Oh, you never got fast boots?
But I had the drill shortcut.
Yeah,
So
I think it might be possible to soft lock yourself in the game if you don't have fast boots.
That's rough. But, man, I mean...
That's playtest worthy. I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah.
No, you can't get soft locked because every place where you could save the game can teleport you to the fast boot factory.
Yeah, but you need to get coins. How do you get coins if you don't have a sword to get past a lot of stuff?
I guess, but I'll bet you, because I got all the coins, and there's like I forget how many, but there's way more than you actually need. There's probably ways to get coins without having to fight anything.
I only got
enough
3 or
coins
4.
for the boots. Yeah, there's more than that, but I think most of
9,
them.
I think.
I think there's even more than
Total?
that.
Total coins?
Yeah.
There's 19.
Yeah,
19, my bad.
there's way more than what the actual, and I think that's the only thing you spend money on.
Yeah, it's the fast boots.
So I think there's plenty more coins that you can get that don't require a sword, because a lot of them you just like walk behind a bush and it's there.
Which also is kind of annoying because there's no rhyme or reason for where any of the coins are or where the extra hearts are all that much. And I guess it's a small world, and eventually, after a while, you will have walked all of it. So it makes sense to hide them in kind of obtuse places. But I generally didn't have a sense of where the game designers were going to hide stuff, even after a while.
So I'm going to say something that kind of like, it's probably just inherently wrong.
I like when you preface your comments with that.
Yeah. But I think this is worthy of like talking about.
Okay.
So Gino, in other podcasts, you've mentioned that like this game or that game didn't respect my time.
Yep.
Do you think Minit respects your time?
I would say yes, because this game is only maybe an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
And the conceit I found interesting for the entirety of it. I think that it's about 1 to 2 hours worth of interesting to see this conceit. I think that the way that they've kind of riffed on the Zelda structure was interesting. So I enjoyed my experience with it, and it didn't overstay its welcome.
Okay, so like I agree with what you said, but one of the things that I really wanted to do with this game that I felt like I couldn't was explore, and you just can't do that in this game. Now, this is a personal preference, so I don't want to fault the game by its design for not letting me do this. It's just something that Billy wants to do, but he can't in this game. Not in the same way, right? Because if I want to go to a specific room and like sword check every, like smackable object for a hidden wall or like an illusory wall, I can't do that.
You can, it just takes time.
You're right.
It's just inefficient.
Right. It's inefficient. So in that one in that one like narrow way, I feel like the game didn't respect my time. I didn't give this game enough thought to do like a New Game Plus. I think there's other like. I think the game opens up a little more in New Game Plus. I think there's like other characters, something you can play as. But I would love to see a version of this game that has the timer turned off. You might get that. I didn't play the game enough. That might be a part of the game in its New Game Plus, bag. But I would want to have the clock turned off so I could actually explore what the game is trying to tell me. Even if it's in a not really like a real playthrough, but just like, hey, you can go into this mode and then the clock's turned off and you can just have fun and explore. A game that brings this to mind, or that made me think of this, it's going to sound kind of weird, but a game that I think is similar to Minit, and let me just talk about the game. It's the game I want to. It's the game I want to be the guy. So
Yep.
those games are also like aesthetically not that different from Minute. You go into this world, you have these like small bits of incremental advantage, but you just die and restart and die and restart and die and restart for reasons that are most of the time unintelligible. And I want to be the guy also kind of doesn't respect your time, but you have to specifically sign up for that when you play that game, right? Kind of like you sign up to play Dark Souls to rage about getting killed for bullshit reasons. And you kind of have to sign up to play Minute to know that you're going to have this clock on you the whole time. But some games execute this understanding that you're going to have a partially, like, I guess, like, limiting or bad experience. I think some games do that well, and some games do that poorly. Like Dark Souls did it well. I think I Want to Be the Guy did it well. I wasn't really vibing with Minute's execution of this.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I do think that what Minute did could be done in other games better. Like, it obviously was done well in Majora's Mask. That's probably the best example of this mechanic of having a resetting clock, a Groundhog's Day type scenario, if you will. But I think other games could take the Minute approach of having it much shorter and have you essentially almost like a roguelike. Every run is getting another piece of the grand puzzle solved.
Yeah, and I would say, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Half Minute Hero is very, very similar to Minute in conceit. The conceit of that game is it's an RPG that you have to – there's different enemies that are casting a spell that will destroy the world in 30 seconds. And the beginning of every chapter basically is a new creature discovering the spell and starting to cast it. And so you have 30 seconds to level up your character and do RPG things like solve problems and then get to the final boss and kill them. You have to level up your character to the point where you can defeat the boss, and you have 30 seconds to do it. And then they play around with time a little bit by letting you reset the 30 seconds by paying money. So you can grind for money to get yourself more time. But ultimately it is, play an RPG in 30 seconds. And I think that the execution of that is actually quite a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
You end up with they tell more story. Your character has a little bit of agency. There's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. It's definitely playing it for comedic effect. The enemies that you're dealing with are different every time. There's actually puzzles within the development that make sense and kind of build on each other. So I've seen this conceit done with a similar, fantasy vibe, but better. So I completely get where you're coming from. I think, do we have anything else to say about Minute? I mean, you defeat that pig. He turns into a sword elemental.
Yeah, and kill it. There was one other thing, small point I wanted to make. And it sort of has to do with pressure, right? And you'd think with a game like this, or like, issues where there's sort of time crunches, usually they're more sort of pressure-filled situations. I'm trying to think. Can you guys think of like a timed exercise that creates a distinct feeling of pressure within games?
Within games?
Yeah, like if you have like a time trial, right? You have like, all right, I have 20 seconds to get through this point. I'm trying to think if there's a good example of that now.
In Super Mario 64, you had those things where you hit a switch and the blocks would appear to get to some location before they disappeared and you'd fall to your death.
Yeah, things like that, right? Like usually you'd have such a time trial and it would create a sort of pressure-filled atmosphere, right? Like, oh my God, I got to get this done. But the sort of paradox I think here in Minute is that because the stakes are so low, there really is no feeling of pressure at all. Right? Like, like if you die, nothing's really going to happen. Like worst case scenario, you go back to wherever it is your village. Right? So while it has this sort of time crunch, there's really no sort of real pressure, especially when you get to keep your items. So I would have liked something where, if you're going to have this time crunch, as the timer gets down, you should really feel a heightened pressure. Whereas with this, it's really like, screw it. We'll just try again.
Yeah. In here, the penalty for not moving quickly is inconvenience.
Yeah, it's just
that is
a walk.
Inherently, it's not that interesting to be mildly inconvenienced over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, there were plenty of things that I attempted when I played this game. And as I was playing, it wasn't that I was worried that my character would run out of time and I would die. I would often just measure whether I could do something by whether I could reach a location in 60 seconds and get to a safe spot where I could save. And if I couldn't, then I probably wasn't supposed to be doing this yet.
Right. I think this just goes back to the point I was trying to make about identification, really. It's like you don't really care what happens to this individual because the stakes are so low. So there's no identification, and conversely, there's no pressure, really.
Yeah, the stakes are very low, and your character has no personality.
Right.
So
So
it's
if he
kind of
dies,
pressured. It's cross-pressured in a bad direction.
exactly.
Yep. So that's Minit. We spoke about it for more than a minute, but that's fine. At least we described it in less than a minute. So thank you, Pete.
Yeah. Happy to pick it.
It is now my turn to pick.
Do it,
the
Gina.
game. And the concept of time actually was interesting to me, and I thought, hey, games about people locked in Sisyphean torment that are occurring over and over and over again with kind of time paradoxes and stuff like that. That sounds interesting. What if we played the best game about that? Let's play Chrono Trigger.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I'm way into that soundtrack.
Yeah, everyone is.
Chrono Jigga, too.
Ooh.
Chrono Jig also from friend of the show, Too Mellow.
Mm-hmm. Excellent mashup. If you guys haven't listened to it, give it a listen.
Yep. So I want to play Chrono Trigger. It's been a while since I've played that game, and it still holds up from the times I played it in the past, at least from what I remember.
While we're talking about time, if I could just give a shout out to a cool article by EP. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
That's fine.
Except that it's time, but it's called Time, Work Discipline, and Industrial Capitalism. It's by E.P. Thompson, and it's all about how capitalism had to sort of establish these time parameters to work. So, fits with I shouldn't say fits with my socialist leanings.
Yes. Well, I don't think that there's much socialism in Chrono Trigger.
It's a long game. There might be.
I haven't played it in a long time, so maybe there's more socialism there than I remember.
Yeah.
We'll find out. There's definitely dinosaurs, though.
Yes, there are.
And Nobuo Uematsu's there. What a good
Great
game.
It is.
So we'll be playing Chrono Trigger next. Thank you, Billy.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Enjoyed Minute for I'd say about a minute.
Thank you, Pete.
Always a good time. I think I enjoyed it a little bit longer than Billy, but it's quick, it's cheap. Give it a shot if this piqued your interest.
And thank you, listeners. Till next time, peace.